Okay, and if everybody's ready, I think we'll get started. I believe a few more people are going to be joining us as we go through the meeting. But the reason I wanted to start fairly on time is we have until 6:45, and so this probably will go by very quickly. But for our first meeting, I wanted to say welcome, everybody, and thank you for being part. Oh, to Superintendent Anselm's office?
Yeah, you remember telling me that that's what you do?
I do not, but I'm glad you're here. So,
Sorry.
But thank you for joining us. We appreciate your time that you're donating, and we do realize your time is very precious, but it's a very important thing that we're all here to do, to look at the budget, understand the budget, contribute to ideas for the budget, ask questions about it as we're going forward. So I think for the first time this community has done this, I think this will be a great experience. I anticipate as the years go by, we'll become more sophisticated at what we do. But this is a really good chance for everyone to learn more how we create a $25.7 million budget. So why don't we start by going around the table? Perhaps we could start with the board president, of everybody introducing themselves and just letting people know if you're a board member, if you're an administrator, union representative, community member, just to kind of give everyone a sense as to who's on the committee. And also, the one thing I would say is, since we are taping this, we are going to put them on our website. If you're able to, and you don't have a microphone for you to speak in front of, if you can speak as much as possible to the mic so they can pick it up for the recording.
Mike Burns, board president, and thank you everyone for doing this.
Barb Henry, board member.
Colin Campbell, also a board member.
Jen Horschel, I'm a parent and on the Budget Advisory Committee.
Hi, Lucinda Karstad, Director of IT, and I'm here as a representative of the Administration Union.
Richard Minikheim, I'm an advisory board member.
David Martin, Superintendent of Buildings and Grounds and Supervisor Representative.
Pass the mic. Don Johnson, advisory board member.
Laura Feasley, teacher and member of the ETA.
Brenda Bergstaller, CSEA union rep and parent.
Okay, thank you very much, everyone. Okay, now what everyone has in front of them now, the community members received their binders before we started tonight, but everyone else has in front of them our first binder for the budget advisory team. So if you take a look at it, what you're actually going to see with all the tabs, it's broken out by month. So as we're going through the process, you will get materials in advance of the meeting is our goal. So you will get materials for each month as we go through it. So November, if you take a look at that tab, we already have materials in there, what we're going to be covering today. And I do not anticipate that we will get through all of those materials today, but I want to make sure you actually have it for your review. And then as each successive month goes through, what we're going to do is we did ask for everybody's email address. We're going to try to email the materials to you. Let us know if that process doesn't work, but we're going to try and save a few trees if we can as well, and a few of the taxpayer dollars if you're able to print them out and bring them with you. That would be greatly appreciated, and then just put it into the appropriate month. As I said, we'll make every attempt to get that information to you prior to the meeting started. And also, as we're going through each individual meetings, questions will come up that people will actually have. Suggestions, ideas, that sort of thing. Since I'm also taking minutes, a lot of what I will actually do is take those questions, suggestions, ideas. I may get the information and provide them either via email or at the next meeting. So just to lay that out to let people know as well. I'm the type of person I'd rather research the information than just give an answer off the top of my head and then find out that answer is wrong. So I appreciate your cooperation with that as well. Yeah. Okay, so taking a look at the board agenda, what we're going to review today is the charter for the budget advisory team. Why are we here? Why are we in existence? Look at the calendar of what we're looking at for our budget year. Look at the Board of Education goals. Everything that we do as a district should in some way, shape, or form tie back to the Board of Education goals. And I think we squarely fall under Goal 3, as you see, as we're going along. Budget to budget 3-year summary comparison. I don't necessarily expect that we're going to go through this line by line. Many of you have seen the budget before in one shape or another. The community members I met with, as I said, prior to this meeting to review and go over the binder, to let them be able to look at it before we even got here, so to give them a little bit of a leg up since they don't have the ability to normally see the budgets and a lot of the materials that board members get to see on a regular basis. And with that, explain some of the cost center identification that goes along with it, and then we'll move then to the budget grid for next year. And today, and primarily today, I definitely want to make sure everybody here gets a chance to say, as a BAT member, Budget Advisory Team, BAT member, what your personal goals are from this committee, what you would like to see happen here. I have seen this process work in other districts. Eden is its own district, and it should function as this community seems fit. So there will be parts that we review budget, come up with ideas, but every one of you brings something new to the table, and all of that should be incorporated into what this committee actually is. Okay? So you see the presentation calendar down below, but if you take a look at the very next tab, and, okay, your binder was here. I'm not sure where it is now, but it was here. Your binder was left here. Oh, you got it. Okay. All right. Okay, so let's get right into the charter and actually who we are, what we do, looking at the budget for next year. Who we are, an organized group of individuals who represent various constituents of the Eden Central School District. And we tried very hard to make sure that we had representation from all different areas. So the board ultimately adopts the budget for the district. That's one of its main goals. So all the board is part of the budget advisory team just because of that fact. But in addition to that, what we wanted to do is just make sure we touch on as many community aspects as possible. So parents, community members, each of the union representatives, from the administrators to supervisors to CSEA, and who am I missing? And ETA, thank you very much. Appreciate it, as I'm looking right at you, so thank you. But we tried as hard as we could to make sure that we were not missing representation. And I think as the years go on, many of you who are here hopefully will be here in future years as well. We had many people who actually responded. We had an article in the newspaper asking for support. We did receive many requests, and we actually did cap it at this table so we can have a manageable number to work through our first process. And as said, as we're going through, we can always change and modify our BAT committee as years go forward, but this is a manageable level for year one. And what are we here to do? In a nutshell, review, monitor, and validate the proposed spending plan that will be formulated by district administration and recommended for adoption by the Board of Education to be voted by the Eden taxpayers. Now, you will be hearing from the administrators themselves as we go through the budget process. So you'll hear from each of the principals, the directors, you'll hear from me on the finance budget. So you're going to be hearing directly from the people who are putting the budgets together. One person said to me, and I'm not going to say who that person is, but one person said, really, I don't see my job to be going out there and convincing people to vote yes for the budget. And that is not necessarily the goal of this committee. My hope is you will actually go out and tell your friends to do that. But really the goal of this committee is to look at the budget, understand the budget, ask questions about the budget, and contribute ideas. And hopefully as we're going through that process, you'll see what's going into the budget. You'll see it's a fair process. And an extension of that, go out and tell your friends, here's what I've seen. And then just by sharing that, it shows hopefully support for it as well. Okay? And how are we going to do this? Review presentations by administration of various budget components to be discussed by the team. Written materials to be furnished, as I said, in advance is what we're hoping for at meetings with an agenda. Role clarification. As I said, we have multiple perspectives here. Administration. The administrators will prepare, formulate, and revise budget proposals for review and advisement by budget advisory team members. The team members. review budget proposals, and advise by constructive feedback through inquiry, questions to administration. And I just want to touch on that for a second. I think everybody knows, and I've seen this in every budget process I've ever been part of, budgets are a tough thing, especially as budgets get tighter. They are a very personal topic to many people. You all pay taxes. Everybody here has a stake. People are employed here. We understand that. And we do know as we go through budgets and as we get closer to looking at the personnel and we start looking at the tough process of where potential cuts will come from, it can get personal. And understandably so. It's people's livelihoods. We get that. But with this committee here, what we're looking for is, again, ways to find solutions. So one of the things that we're going to ask every member here is, as we look through this and as we move forward, to do so and to say, what suggestions can we give? How do we not make this personal? How do we keep the people out of it and look at the positions? Because if you start looking at the people, then it really becomes personal and it gets really difficult to have a good constructive budget that benefits the community as a whole. Okay? To understand the budget proposals, as I said, there are a lot of lines that go into a $25.7 million budget, a lot of different components. And we'll go through that and kind of give everyone an idea as to what makes up that budget, how much is discretionary, how much we're required to do, information such as that. And to inform the stakeholders they represent on budget developments and communicate issues or concerns on budget areas back to this committee. So as I said, not to necessarily just go blindly say vote for it, but understand it and share with people what you're actually seeing here. Okay? Building a budget or a spending plan, you will get information with enrollment history, projections by the schools, outcome-based education, cost center accountability, and again, looking at each of the areas of the budget and showing with the administrators in that portion of the budget, they work very hard on building a sound budget, but they're also accountable for that as well. So we'll look at that as well. All expenses should be aligned to the educational standards, the Board of Education goals, and the strategic plan for the district as well, which you will see as we're going throughout. Let's go to the next one. I won't read verbatim every single page, but just to go through it a little. I wanted to make sure that we provided for each one of you information for the Budget Advisory Team members. So you have a way to know who's on the committee. You're all going to be working together for the next several months, so it's at least good to know who's on the committee. And if you need to get a hold of each other for any particular reason, you've got contact information. So there's a front and back for each page. Okay? Next, what I wanted to just touch on for this committee, and you're hearing me talk a lot at this meeting. And in future meetings, you're not going to hear me talk as much as you are right now, but as we're getting started, for the next meeting or two, you're going to hear more from me, and then as we're going on from other people. And I think you'll all be very appreciative once you stop hearing me talk. So, but looking at, again, the Board of Education goals, everything we should be doing as a district should be aligned as the Board of, with the Board of Education goals. So if we take a look at the three goals, number one, the board will review and approve a three-year written plan to guide facility changes and improvements. So when you hear presentations as we're going through, and I'm just going to single two people out, not to ask them to speak, but just as a highlight. When you hear Dave Martin speak about buildings and grounds, when you hear Lucinda talk about technology, infrastructure, and what we're planning for the coming year and what we're looking at going forward, you're going to hear us talk about GLP. It's going to be a question that's on everyone's mind. What are we going to do? And for technology, just as an example, Lucinda has to weigh right now, without having all the information at her fingertips, how much do we invest in technology at GLP without knowing exactly where we're going? It's not an easy thing to do. You want to make sure that the students have as much as they can possibly have at the building, but how much do you put in a building before that final answer is given, and where do you go? So you know, Lucinda, God love you for that. I wouldn't want your shoes at all, because that's a very tough to negotiate that. David, with the buildings, and to say, you know, where are our best dollars spent? we all know it's a limited pool of funds we have, and how much we put in each building, if we're going to be making changes, if we're looking at a potential capital project. Again, more shoes I wouldn't necessarily want to be in as well, because that's a tough spot to figure out how do you balance out everybody's needs to make sure that they have the best environment to learn in. 2, increase academic rigor and raise expectations for all Eden students. And I think it goes without saying that as we build the budget, we're building the best budget possible to provide the best programs available to students. That's why we're all here. And I think that's why every person is sitting at this table, to make sure the students have the best that they can. So I think it goes without saying the whole budget is that process of making sure we give everything that we can to students. But as we're going through, a lot of the things that we are required to do from the state, federal governments are unfunded mandates, things that we must do, things that if sometimes given our own choice, we'd rather put directly into student programming that have absolutely nothing to do, with where we're putting our dollars now. So you'll see that as we're going through the process as well. And 3, strengthen the culture of the district by building greater trust through improved communication among all community stakeholders. And I think that's at the very heart of what this committee is. This committee is, again, beginning that process of letting the community be part of that process. This committee is an advisory committee. It doesn't have fiduciary responsibility, it doesn't have voting responsibility, but it has nonetheless a very important responsibility. You guys are bringing forward the ideas that all the board is hearing. As I said, the board are the one who vote on the budget and decide this is what we're going to put forth to the community. A lot of work and thought goes into that. But I have to tell you, for everyone sitting at this table, the ideas you're bringing forth, it's going to be a stronger budget, because the more ideas you have, the more different perspectives you have. Not 1 or 2 or 7 people can think of all the ideas all the time. So that's why having all the people at the table is better than not having the community involved. And I firmly believe that. That's why even when I interviewed here, I said I strongly believe that this is the way to go. Will people have differences as we go along? Absolutely. I guarantee we'll have differences as we go along, and that's okay. People have ideas and would like to have those ideas implemented right away. Will we be able to implement every idea right away? I'll guarantee you right now, no, we won't. Does that mean they're bad ideas? Absolutely not. But again, with a limited pot, I like to say, and I've used this phrase time and time again, the pie is what the pie is. So the best we can do is make the best pie we actually can, put in the best ingredients we can, but at the end of the day, our resources are at roughly the 25.7. So what is the best way to divvy that up to, again, provide the best education for students? So as we're going through this process and as ideas come forward, number 1, there are no bad ideas. Number 2, there's no judgment, I think, with any ideas that we're going to have here. And number 3, if you have an idea and it's not implemented right away, please don't take that personally. It is not meant personally for anybody here. And on top of that, just because it's not necessarily done this year, doesn't mean it doesn't get on the rotating list of ideas for the future as well. Okay, so I just wanted to let everyone know. So everyone's free here to make the suggestions they want, again, as long as we're keeping it non-personal and positive, then I think that we'll be in a really good situation here. Okay? Okay, next, what I actually wanted to show you here, and I'm just going to go through just the beginning of this report. It's a detailed appropriation budget report. Now, these are online. We put these up there every month for the public to see. So you can actually go to our website at any time you like and actually review this. But let me go over with you for just a minute as to what this report actually says and what you're looking at. So we're just going to take the first 4 lines. So you're seeing where it says account, description, and then 3 budgets in the category. Okay, so as we're looking through the accounts, the first 4, bless you, A, 1010, and then, so you've got a letter, 4 numbers, 3 numbers, 2 numbers, and 4 numbers. So let me explain that a little bit. That first letter that you're seeing, A, that's the general fund. That is the bulk of what our budget actually is. Now, we have multiple funds that any district deals with. So you can have a capital fund for capital projects, which is an H. You can have the school lunch fund. You can have grants, which are the F funds. There are different letters for each program. But the bulk of what we do as a district all stem from that A. So what you're seeing here is everything run through all the way through. So when you see that, and this is all for the A fund, the general fund, again, which is what we're looking at building the budget, okay? The first 4 digits you're actually seeing, we call that a function. And by function, kind of think of this as, it's almost like a funnel as we're working from the top, the widest possible, and working way down to the more specific information. So when you're taking a look at that general fund, that's the biggest net we have. The next is what we call the function, or the big area where the spending is. So the area could be the Board of Education, the district clerk, the business office, special education, the major categories of where spending actually takes place. So when you see in the first section, the first 4 numbers, these are Board of Education expenses. So again, we're going to start broad and keep working our way down. So the next 3 digits, again, are more specific yet. This is looking at the type of spending within the Board of Education. And they range from codes from the 100s, which are salaries, 200s, which are equipment. The bulk of where spending is are the 100 salary. I'll tell you right now, about 75% of our budget is in the 100 codes for salaries. That's just the bulk of any school district's budget. But what like a lot of people like to look at and tend to focus on are a lot of the 400s. And 400s are things like supplies, contracts, things of that nature. The next 2 digits, again, more specific still. The 2-digit code is the location. So location, is it the district? Is it the junior, senior high school? Is it elementary, or is it GLP? So 00 is district, 01, junior, senior high school, 02, elementary, and 04 is GLP. We do skip 03, which Mary is 03, no, out of district maybe?
At one point, it was used for a couple different things. It was either one, we had something out of district, or it was used for bus garage.
Okay. And just so everyone knows, this is Mary Labasco. She's the treasurer of our district, and she's going to be joining us for the budget advisory meetings as well, watching the process. So, yeah. 00 is district, 01, junior, senior high school, 02, elementary, 04, GLP. Okay. And I'm glad we're taping this because it's a little hard for me to take notes as I'm going through this. So, and then as you're looking through with descriptions, it kind of gives you a little bit of an idea as to what it is. So when we see the 451, as I said, that's supplies. So what you're actually seeing is in the 11, 12, and 13, what the budgets have been. So you can see a 3-year snapshot of where we've been budgeting over the course of the years, okay? And then finally, the category. Is it an administrative component? Is it a program component? Program component is direct student instruction. Or is it a capital component? Things like buildings, grounds, upkeep of the facilities. Questions on the report and how to read the report? Let me even go to line 5 to kind of give you an idea. So you see the first 4 lines and what they are: supplies, periodicals, conference, miscellaneous. And then when you get to the 5th line, 1010 Board of Education, basically it's just a summary adding all the expenses for that particular category, for that function as we call it, okay? And then if you go to the last page, the grand totals, you'll see what the budget has been for the last 3 years. Now, what you see by this is that the budget is actually, it took a dip in 12-13 and then back up. It's very rare in most school districts where you ever really see a dip in the school budget. Quite honestly, my personal belief, you'll hear, I think I'm fairly conservative when you hear me talk about the budget. There should always be some modest growth, because if you don't have some modest growth, at some point you are going to have to account for the dips that you see right there. So at some point, it's very common to see some nominal growth as we're going through. So we went from 26.1 to 25.1, back up to 25.7, and our budget this year is at 25.7. Okay? Yes, Mr. Johnson?
When you have a dip like that,
Yes.
I don't know, does the state look at that and say they don't need as much state aid next year, so let's cut them back?
It is a great question. No, not necessarily, because there are many reasons why you could have decided, and I'm not saying this in this case here, you could have decided that we're not going to have a tax increase this year for many reasons, which will bring your budget down as well. And that's why, as I said, you get into dangerous territory when you go through that path of saying we're not going to raise taxes, we're not going to do anything like that. But that's a very common reason why you could see it either held flat or even go down. If you know that you had a decrease in state aid for the coming year, you already know, like we'll start to hear in January what the state is going to give us for money for next year. And we may see that the state's saying, oh, you know what, it's not a good year for us. We're giving every district less money. And so that could account for a dip. That doesn't mean the state's then going to come and say is because, well, since we gave you less money this year and you have a lower budget, so next year you're already starting, it doesn't necessarily correlate specifically that way. Okay? But good question. Other questions?
As we start doing the budget development or analysis process, my assumption is that there's going to be some untouchables,
Yes.
such as special ed materials for students that we have no control over.
Correct.
So those will all be identified.
By the administrators. As they're presenting their budgets, it is my hope that each administrator will say, these are certain things that we need to spend. For instance, I will give an example. In Lucinda's budget, there are certain lines that we want to spend every available dollar. And she'll go through that in her budget process, but the reason for that is the state, when they're calculating our aid for the next year, they look at directly very specific lines and say, if you don't spend those lines, which we've set up to go directly for students, we're going to give you less money the next year. We're going to base it on what you actually spend. And if you don't spend it, we're assuming you don't need it. So some of that spending is our areas we don't touch because yeah, textbooks is great. Yes.
How close does the state micromanage
Oh,
the school district?
yes. We actually just finished well, the initial due date was September 3rd, and then they give districts time past that. We have to provide very specific, detailed information, line by line, basically this entire budget to the state, and what we're projecting for the next year. They watch everything with a fine-tooth comb, and they monitor. And I'll tell you, when you submit that report, it's already got built-ins, like textbook. If you put in there, that number doesn't equate, that's going to affect your aid for the following year. So, oh, trust me, they're watching that extremely closely.
Before we get started on this,
Yes.
if we did go to the computers, like the iPads, would that be considered a textbook? Could it be qualified under that at all?
Yes.
Did it used to be qualified like that?
It had to be only textbook materials. And the year before, they allowed us to do software, but this year, they just loosened it up and they will allow, I'm not sure about iPads, but definitely computers. And use it for hardware.
So we can consider that a textbook?
Yes. Depends on how it's used, though. Depends on how it's used.
Right. Like I wouldn't be able to get a computer and have that go under that code for students. Or I wouldn't be able to get an iPad for use and say, hey, great, we can just put out that
No,
one.
I'm talking about the students.
Yep, absolutely, yep. For computers, yeah.
So it could be an iPad or a computer, but if it's in the office, and you can't use it for that. And we have demonstrated it's used.
I think what I'm looking for is a clarification on textbooks. That would fall under the textbooks.
At this point, we've only used it for textbooks.
And the reason why, quite honestly, is we could actually use more textbook dollars for textbooks than we actually get. So right now, we don't even have the luxury of being able to say, oh, we've got extra money in this line that we could put towards computers. We don't have enough textbook materials now that we can even say that. Okay, looking at the next page here, and this is a report right off of the state site and on fiscal accountability for the district. What I wanted to show here is just a little bit about how we compare with other districts, where we're at, where we are versus similar districts, and where we are versus districts across the state. So looking at this is for 2010-11, which is the most recent data that was up there. Looking at this, for our school district, for general education and special education. So it lists what our expenditures are, the number of students that we have, and the expenditures per pupil. And what I want to show is education is not a cheap business. It costs a lot to educate a student in New York State. And when you look at this and you put it into dollars and cents, in our district, it costs $7,880 in 10-11 to educate a general education student. To educate a special education student, it was $17,701. It's a lot of money for both, whether it's general education or special education. So looking at that, I mean, there are a lot of ramifications for what we do, whether, and I'll give an example of this. If, let's say, we don't closely monitor the students who come in. If you take a student who shouldn't be living in our community or shouldn't be attending our school because they don't live in the community, we're now spending $7,880. That's why we're so careful to make sure all the students who are here are our students, because it does cost a lot. So we are very careful about making sure that we're educating every child, every Eden child who should be here, okay? But one of the other points that I really wanted to show about this, and I think this speaks volumes for this district, is if you take a look at other similar district groups, which is Section 2, you take a look at expenditures per pupil for similar sized districts. General education students, $9,795. Special education students, $28,000, $28,585. A significant difference in my book. But what that says is we, as a district, have been careful with our dollars. We're not above the average. We're not above the average? Yes.
What's a similar district group? Similar size or similar, what does that mean?
And what the state's actually using is that determinant. I don't know what their determinants are. Yeah, this is right from the state. So they group them and say, and it probably is based on student numbers. So, you know, they're not going to compare us to a Williamsville with 10,000 kids.
But Olden could be a similar school. Olden.
More recent numbers?
Yeah, this is, yeah. Yep.
Why is
It wouldn't change much, Mike. I mean, what you're seeing is about the same.
why is the special education too important?
Because sometimes they need a nurse, sometimes they need their own aide, sometimes they need a special instructor, and that's why. They might even need their own bus.
Services are much more intensive for a special education student. There is a law in New York State that we try to educate a child in the least restrictive environment possible. So where we can, we educate them in school districts as opposed to other facilities. But in order to do that, we need to give extra supports to give those kids as great a chance of success as any other student. And to do that, just as she said, it requires many more additional supports, more academic intervention services, nursing, occupational therapy, physical therapy, sometimes out-of-district placements to do that. So whether it's at whatever program through BOCES, and that all gets as part of this.
Even smaller, if there's smaller class sizes too, sometimes you're looking at students who are in the class that's a quarter the size of the typical class, just to meet their needs. So that right there, you need the salary for teacher.
Does BOCES fall as part of your special education?
Portions, not all, because they're,
Vocational program?
yeah,
I'm
no,
talking BOCES,
Yeah.
okay?
No.
You know, there's a lot of things that BOCES offers.
no, BOCES offers general education services and special education services. They offer both, so it just depends on the program.
Here that's going for automotive.
That's vocational.
That's general education.
No, no,
That number isn't
No.
reflected in.
no,
But this number does reflect students who are sent out of district.
yes, correct.
So you could have a student who's going to Falk,
the student who's going to Canaletian, to any of these high need schools where it may be a physical disability that could cost upwards of $50,000-$60,000 without the transportation for one student. And then there are students who are in the district and in a regular classroom where it's really not an added expense really at all that's direct. There might be some indirect costs, but not direct. But it's a very, very large gamut for students with disabilities.
I have one other question. Does educating the special education students within the system, does it hold back the non-special education students?
Well, we don't have it.
I'm a special education provider. I'm a speech therapist in a neighboring school district. I push in to classrooms of students who are emotionally disturbed, autistic. No, I mean, the integrated classrooms that are run, you really can't tell. They identify kids from the non-identified kids. They run like a well-oiled machine. Even the students who are in self-contained classrooms are mainstreams with other students. There's no impact on the gen ed student whatsoever, or vice versa, for that matter. This really is the best setting, being in home with their peers, with the children who live in their neighborhood, who they ride the bus with. It's socially the best option for them. It's emotionally the best option for them. And I think overall, for education, it is the best option. I will tell you, I worked in the private sector on the other side of education for a while. Looking at it from a fiscal standpoint, districts do their best to try to serve some kids in-house as best they can. Out-of-district costs are expensive. It's probably triple.
The reason I ask is because when I was a kid,
I was just going to touch on that when we were all younger, absolutely.
the kids that, we didn't call them special education kids at the time, okay, but they were in a whole room by themselves.
And sometimes that's the case now, sometimes it's not. As much as we can integrate them in a general education setting, we will do that. Education has come, I think, leaps and bounds from when all of us were in schools. I think all of us remember being lined up in rows and the teacher was talking at us, and we really took notes, we learned our stuff. Some learned better than others, but it was very, it's very rote. Now what we are trying for, and any teacher here, please stop me in any way, shape, or form, but I think what we're looking at right now is we strive for differentiated instruction. And what that means is teaching to the child, to their abilities. So if you're in a classroom, some students are going to get it right away and they're not going to need as much assistance. Some students may need more. So you try to develop lesson plans that are going to meet the needs of high learners, meet the needs of low learners, and give something for everyone. So not everyone's getting the exact same instruction. So to answer your question, and Laura, correct me if you think I'm wrong on this, is the general education student is not getting any less because the special education student is getting their supports. Everyone's getting, if we do it right, their own individualized education in the best setting. Am I saying that?
Yes.
Yes.
This group should also be aware, though, that our number of special ed students is on the increase.
Yes.
That's one of the things we have to deal with in the budget.
Absolutely. We do have a high special education rate in this district. We're still under the state standard, but what that says is, again, I think it speaks volumes of our program here that a lot of people are moving into this district knowing we have a good program. So it is something we do have to watch because, again, when you look at the numbers, if you go to the bottom line here, the total expenditures per student, when you look at that, that is an average of our general education and special education students together, and it's weighted. So we don't want those numbers going up much more than that 15,485, as an example. So the more special education students you have, it's going to drive that overall number up. So we are, and Colin, thank you, that's a great point. We want to be careful and keep that down as much as possible and still provide the best education possible at the same time. And that brings up a point because we could really talk about a lot of topics in this committee. And in one of the meetings that I had with community members, we started talking about some great stuff with Common Core. And we know that's a hot topic right now. But what we're going to do and what you'll see me do through parts of this committee are kind of bring us back into the focus of what we're actually looking at to keep us on track. And there may be other committees that may be better suited for some of the topics that we're actually looking at. So just to let everyone know that as well. I get the unfortunate task of being the timekeeper as well to keep us on task with that. And looking at that, I said we wouldn't get through everything right now because I wanted to make sure we've got about 20 minutes left, 18 minutes left. And we definitely need to end at 5:45. Number one, I promised you we'd only keep it to an hour. And number two, we have a special celebration, and I hope everyone's able to stay for the presentation that we have coming up. I think everyone will really enjoy it. But one of the things I wanted to make sure that we did tonight is to go around the table and talk to each one of you and kind of get a sense as to what you would like to see this committee become, kind of why you joined it, and what you're looking for. So, Board President, might we be able to start with you, sir?
What I would like to see is, that's about it. Sorry, we can go.
As a board member and a community member, I personally would like a lot more understanding of what's going on with all the details.
With all what?
With all the details, there's just a lot of when you understand something, then you can work with it.
I'm hoping that we can get some useful information, some new information from different sources other than, as Tom referred to, just deciding the budget in a vacuum or in a little room with a few people. So I think the more information we get from the more different sources, the better.
I would agree with Barb. My hope is that there is a better understanding of the budget process. Even though I am an educator, I will admit I am, even in my own district, naive to how the whole budget is developed and what really goes into it. I joined this or asked to be a part of it because I wanted to have a better education of the process myself, and I wouldn't mind being a bridge between what goes on here and the community. I think there was a lot of misunderstanding after attending the board meetings last year. I don't think the public really has a strong, and I'm including myself in that, what the state offers, how the board has to work around it, and what the expenditures really are. So that's my hope.
Again, I'm representing the administrators, and as Tom mentioned earlier, each one of the administrators will be coming here to present, and I think that says what our main purpose is that we want to communicate with you the budget process, and we want to get out to everyone what goes on in that building of that budget, and I think that's really important to us to communicate as much as possible, to answer as many questions as possible, and to be as open as we can be about the whole process.
I think I need to understand the budget and process a lot more, but I think the result I'd like to see is the people in the town finally understand it enough they can stand up to the state instead of hearing this, it's been mandated. I'm sick of hearing that, quite frankly. The budget that we control is very small. The states use revenue sharing, put it all in the responsibility of our board that, oh yes, you're running a school, when in fact you're not. I'd like to see the school be able to tell the community, this is what you need to do besides the school vote to get things straightened around. We're not the enemy, school board. The enemy is the way the whole thing has been twisted at the state level, if you will, and I'd like to see that straightened around so that we can actually have the communities as an intelligent unit vote when it's important at the state elections as such to get things straightened around the way we think they should be. When you have triple the cost for a special education student and the horror stories about what happens, sometimes that's just not necessary. I'd like to see a lot of that cleared up, and I'd like to see the community more informed about those types of problems so that the school board can be able to be a guiding light for the community and the things that they need to pay attention to when it comes time to try to correct the things that they all feel are out of line.
Well, because I sit on the other side of the coin, being in facilities and non-teaching, I think it's important that I bring to the table what it takes to really keep a facility together. We have aging buildings. This is the newest. It's from 1969. We've only had one addition to it. It's wearing out. It's wearing out very quickly. We want to grow as a district. You need to realize that there's some costs associated with that. As much as we would love to see all the kids be excelled performers, we have to give them the facilities that are required to get there. I have to bring that to the table. You have to understand that as part of the budget process. We need to grow together and not in a vacuum, because it's important for everybody to understand, including myself, that we need to provide the best opportunities with all of the resources, not just the educational piece. It's all of us. So that's why I'm here.
I think I'll pass on comment right now. I'm still learning a little bit here. You don't need that one.
Well, can I go back a second and ask why you joined the committee?
Okay.
May I ask why you joined the committee? Why you agreed to be on it?
Why did I agree to be on it? Saw the ad in the paper. I came to school board meetings, not a lot last year, and it seemed like there was such friction, and it was like more of a pointing game. Like, I got the feeling that the school board was getting blamed by different factions. I mean, I always found that your employees are your best assets in business, okay? Should be the same thing in a school, because we're trying to educate our kids. I want our kids to be the #1 kids. I want them to go out of here and say, oh, you went to Eden? You're coming to my college, or you're coming to my employment. You're from Eden? Oh my God, they got a great school. They got a great school system, great learning center. Right now, we're getting our butts kicked. I wouldn't worry about getting our butts kicked by other school districts in New York State. I'd be worried about what the other countries are doing to us, because they're all going to want jobs. We're lucky we got jobs. It's the way we're brought now. We're taught to think, well, you're lucky if you got a job. That's pretty much it. Go ahead.
I think none of us, unless you've been part of this process before, nobody really understands how this budget works and how it's built and what comes from the state and what has to be paid and what doesn't and where the monies come from and where the monies go. So that's all part of it. But from the teacher point of view, we're very, very thrilled that we finally can sit on a committee where we can express some of our needs, and when something has to get cut, to be able to say, okay, if I have to give up something, or if we as a teaching faculty need to give up something, this is what we'd rather see cut before this. And sometimes we have felt in the past that we were never asked that. What can you live without? What do you absolutely need to have? So that we can avoid things like putting teachers back in November and December and January and that kind of stuff. I mean, if you hear the teachers, we're telling you we can't live without this. And then it's like, oh gosh, they were right. We can't do it without this. So I'm just happy that we finally have a forum for just being heard.
Are you saying just last year or
Oh,
beyond that?
no, not just last year. But, yeah.
I'm sitting on this committee because they were looking for volunteers from the CSEA union, and after repeated requests and no one answered, I volunteered. And so I'm sitting here. What I can offer, I haven't the faintest idea. I guess we'll see when it comes about. But I'm just sitting here and we'll see what it has to say. But it interests me, and the more we learn about the budget, the more we'll learn how we can all help one another, because every single one of us around this table, our number one priority should be, and if it's not, we should get up and walk away, our number one priority should be the children in this district. Anything else, please leave. And that's my number one priority. And I hope all of us are here for the same reason.
I think it's well overdue to have a gathering like this. I wish there would be more people from the community involved, so that they could gain more understanding of what they're voting on.
Scott, you're supposed to speak up because it's getting recorded.
It's getting good.
I think the transparency of the budget itself with the community members is very important. Kind of like, I'm forgetting your name, but what you had said about, yeah, you. Okay. But about, I don't like being told that I'm mandated to do things also too, but having that understanding of what it is and why, and I think is very important, not only for myself, but everybody in the community to know why and where the money is going, and for everybody to have a voice and bring their ideas. Like Tom had said, it may not happen this year, but it's not a bad idea. At least it's on the table and it's something to consider.
We're under an hour.
Wow.
So this gives everyone a chance to have a short break before we actually start the reception. The reception actually begins at 6:45. And as I said, everyone can all stick around because we are honoring a former student. And I think that's all I'm going to say because I don't know how much things that I'm going to say.
Is there going to be a regular board meeting after that?
Yes.
7 o'clock is a regular board meeting. So, thank you all. We, and I don't say we as in the many me's, but we as a board, we as staff, we as community appreciate the time that you're going to be putting into this, and you're being Ms. Henry.